For those of you that I have not met yet, my name is Coach AB, and I get to coach all of your daughters in the Fearless Warriors. So with that, really quickly, I'm going to introduce Carley. So Carley hails from Pennsylvania. She has her own private practice, CM Mental Performance. She works with athletes. She's working with softball, basketball, tennis, which is awesome. And then on the other side of her practice, she works with professionals, aviation, medicine, I think high performers that need to stay calm and collected under pressure. She does it all. So without further ado, Carley, you have the floor. I'm going to get the screen shared. If you want to do a little bit more about you and say, hey.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. As Amanda said, I am from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I went to West Virginia University, and I studied sport and exercise. Sorry, it's always a mouthful. Sport and exercise psychology there. And then I went on for my master's in Florida. I went to Barry University. Terribly miss Florida, especially it's been frigid in PA. And I studied sport, exercise, and performance psychology. So I started up my own practice August 2020, and here we are. And as Amanda said, I work with all different types of athletes, all different ages, and different performers. And I'm just so passionate about what I do. I just feel so blessed that I wake up every day just ready to go. So without further ado, I am ready when you are, Amanda. Okay, so we're going to talk about helping your athlete move beyond perfectionism and into self-acceptance. So there was just my brief background on me. One thing that I didn't mention now looking at it is I cheered competitively for did back handsprings, all of that for 10 years, as well as the school team. And I also ran track. I ran the mile, and I'm still a runner today. So nothing changed with running for me there. But I think everything else I hit on my background. So quick question. I just kind of want to start off. To be honest, I'm a huge discussion person. To be honest, PowerPoints aren't really my thing, but I just kind of want to start off this discussion. What is perfectionism? So just write some things in the chat. What you think perfectionism is, how would you define it? What do you know about perfectionism? And what are some pros and cons of perfectionism? Okay, inability to allow yourself to make mistakes. You need to get it right 100% of the time. How about any pros and cons? Anybody have any pros and cons? Or think that it's all cons? Expectation that you'll be able to do everything. Okay, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, all right. We can keep going. Pro-driven consistency, discipline to get there. Okay, awesome, great. So perfectionism, I just wanted to define it quick. So it's pros. Yep, good, love it. So perfectionism, the definition is as setting extremely high standards in conjunction with overly critical self-evaluation. So pretty much everything that you guys said, hence extremely high standards or putting so much pressure on yourself. And commonly, it's identified in elite athletes as striving for flawlessness. I think somebody might have been you, Coach IB, giving 100% all the time. And something that I think we forget is it's a personality characteristic. So it's something that is a huge part of you. And you'll notice I've noticed with all different athletes that I've worked with of different ages, whether they're youth athletes, collegiate athletes, or they're working toward getting to the pro levels, it's something that this striving for flawlessness and being perfect 100% of the time is the same across every different age group. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward, just really emphasizing that the high standards and being very critical of yourself. So some facts about perfectionism. So perfectionists, they place a great deal of pressure, not just on themselves, but also from the standards of others. So for instance, I actually had a D3 collegiate softball team. It's a great academic school. And this week I was meeting with them, and their level of pressure all the time to perform well is so high. This was the third session that I did with them today. And essentially half the time they're afraid to even participate because they don't want to be wrong. So placing so much pressure on yourself, but also the pressure from other people, whether it's coaches, parents, having to feel perfect. That's what a lot of us, I'm sure, know perfectionism. It's also strongly associated with anxiety. So when it comes to perfectionism, cognitive state anxiety and somatic state anxiety are high. Does anybody know what cognitive state anxiety and somatic state anxiety are? Just out of curiosity. Just even give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Anybody? Coach AB, I saw your thumbs up, thumbs down. So essentially, state anxiety is what we know as a state, right? It's not a trait. So in the moment, feeling cognitive state anxiety, which is all about the thoughts in your head, and somatic state anxiety, which is your heart beating faster, your palms getting sweaty. It's the physiological things. So when somebody is striving for perfection, it's also associated with an increase in those things. It's related to various aspects of motivation in sport, right? If somebody is very perfectionistic to do their best, they're going to be more motivated. It's also linked to burnout. Burnout is something that I think it's a term that's thrown around a lot by different coaches and by athletes, or saying like, oh man, I feel really burnt out. But burnout is so serious, and it's not even just draining mentally, but physically too. And you'll notice that's why a lot of times people can get sick, or athletes can get sick when they're not sleeping well and they're just constantly burning themselves out. It becomes unhealthy and is more likely to lead to burnout when there's unending cycles and high effort. So as Coach AB said earlier, giving 100% all the time. And we know that, as you know, you guys are parents, you're not just like 8-year-olds, but we know that you can only give, the best that you can every day. You're not going to be able to give 100% every single day, like just for so many reasons or life events or whatever might be happening. Also with disappointment and harmful thoughts, in addition to mental and physical exhaustion. So with perfectionism in sport, there are two overarching factors. So you'll notice in the beginning, I said, what are some pros and cons of perfectionism? I think when we hear the term, it's not something that we always associate positively with. But the first one is functional perfectionism, and this one's adaptive. So this is characterized by perfectionistic striving. So wanting to be your best, having high personal standards for yourself, a desire for organization, or self-oriented striving. And with this one, it predicts lower levels of state anxiety that we talked about and higher levels of self-confidence. So this would be more of like a pro of perfectionism, right? It's setting those goals for yourself. When I opened my own practice, I had these goals for myself. I at times maybe put a little bit too much pressure, but I had goals for myself. For dysfunctional perfectionism, this one's maladaptive. So these concerns with being so overly obsessed with mistakes or parental expectations or parental criticism, self-doubt, socially prescribed expectations. So all of these things make up the dysfunctional perfectionism. So it's something that these are the things where it leads to burnout. There are higher levels of somatic and cognitive state anxiety that we talked about earlier. Predicts the fear of failure. Fear of failure is something big with perfectionism, kind of like I mentioned a little bit ago with the team that I've been working with at the collegiate level. These are people that aren't just athletes, but they go to such a great school academically that they're afraid of failing. They're afraid of experiencing that shame and embarrassment. So it's something that I think a lot of teams, a lot of individuals can deal with. And also you'll notice the as parents, like parental expectations, parental criticism. You might not be that parent that is that way, but you might know a parent that is that way, or a parent that is super hard on their child. And it's something that I think at the youth level really causes athletes to become more perfectionistic. But you can also, have a child that, you're not perfectionistic, or your spouse isn't perfectionistic, but they just ended up perfectionistic. So that's something that can just happen sometimes too.
Carly, I love what you said about wanting to meet parents' expectations. One of the things that I've noticed, which is interesting, I think we forget this a lot because we're the parents, we're close to it. And when you are in a practice and you're that mediary person to talk to work through this, I experience this all the time in group calls and on one-on-one calls. The top two reasons that girls are afraid to fail is they don't want to let their teammates down. That's number one. And they don't want to let their parents down. That's number two. Coaching actually ranks third because they already know that their coach has high expectations for them. At the end of the day, a coach is a coach. At the end of the day, your mom and dad. So they may switch teams. They may graduate. They may move on from softball. But that idea of they crave your praise, I think we forget that. And it's easy for me to say because I have a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old. So I'm not in that phase of parenting, but Carly, you nailed this on the head. I love that you've kind of showed this on the level of how they're interpreting it in their brain, and that I've never heard someone explain perfectionism as something that could be beneficial. So how do you have that conversation with an athlete to let them know, we don't want to shame them for that perfectionism. How can you have that conversation to show them, hey, part of your perfectionism is actually beneficial? How are you explaining that to your athletes?
Yeah, no, that's actually a great question. So this actually happened with this softball team the other week. I was doing a session with pitchers and catchers, and I asked them about strengths and weaknesses. And one of them, she was really honed in on her weaknesses. And I said, we all have area to grow, but when you're so focused on your weaknesses, your confidence is going to go down because you have no trust, you have no self-belief in yourself. And I kind of brought up this question. I said, is all perfectionism bad? And I opened it up to all of them. They're just kind of like, well, no. And I was like, it's being aware. The first thing in mental skills overall, and I'll even touch on this later, is self-awareness. So knowing, hey, you know what? This is a perfectionistic tendency, or this is how I'm having these high personal standards for myself. But you know what? It's okay to just like be calm. Even a personal example was when COVID hit. I'm super into running. I'm super into working out. And I was like really struggling like the one day. Like I just was like, man, every day I'm trying to just go at it. Like I have all this time. And I was like, Carly, you're human first. You cannot physically, go full out every single day. So that was something that even hit me. So I think Coach AB, the biggest thing is self-awareness, knowing, hey, you know what, this is something that's a positive thing, right? Like the desire for organization, perfectionistic strivings, right? Like holding yourself to that higher standard. But when it starts to get to the point where it's taking control of you, keyword control, that's when I think it can become a big issue. When we're like, oh, I can't make any mistakes, right? Or I can't fail at all. I think that's when it really starts to become an issue. When it's really starting to tear down your confidence and your self-belief, I think is such a big thing. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah. And talking them through that. I think it's awesome too, because you guys as parents know your daughter best. So if you can just get curious, self-awareness, if you take away one thing from this, it's really having that conversation, and you can't be aware unless you have the conversation with your daughter. But you guys are all here and you're putting in the work. So I did want to mention quick before we keep going, if you guys have any questions, I'm managing the slides and I'm also watching the chat. So if you guys have questions, I'll kind of watch those for Coach Carley as well.
So I kind of started talking about this, but coping with perfectionism, right? So how do we, again, it's a personality characteristic. So if somebody's perfectionistic, that doesn't necessarily mean that coping with it means it's just going to go away, right? But it's saying, hey, you know what, how can we nip this, and kind of take it from a different angle? And the first thing is self-awareness. I always say, for any mental skill, for anything, you can't grow if you don't know. If you don't know what is bothering you, or if you're afraid to admit it to yourself, you can't grow until you decide to take that first step and say, you know what, I'm realizing this about myself, and I'm going to take a second to be vulnerable and really try and work on this. The second thing is being like that we're human first. I'm sure we're all familiar with Simone Biles. She really comes to mind whenever I think about this or talk about this. She decided, hey, you know what? I need to take a second and, you know, like put me first. And I think there was so much controversy about this and saying, well, if you're performing that level, you should be able to, compete or do great. And I know the Winter Olympics are on right now, but you have to remember, you're human first. Even celebrities, even people in the NFL, even people in the MLB, whoever, we're all human beings first. So we're going to have emotions. We're going to have times where we're upset or we're angry or we're excited or we're frustrated. So I think really remembering that, you know what, I'm human first, and it's okay that I really want to succeed and do well. But when it's really hurting me and impacting my self-esteem, this is what I don't want. The third thing, and this was something that I mentioned that I did with my softball team, is focusing on your strengths over your weaknesses. It's good to be aware of the areas that we need to improve upon, right? We all have room to do, to improve upon as human beings. There's always things that we can improve upon. But if I'm working with somebody who's very perfectionistic, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Like, that's really great that these are your areas you need to work on, but I'm going to end the conversation with focusing more on their strengths, because they need to tone in on their confidence. They need to leave the conversation thinking about all the things that they do well at, so that again is also from my perspective and working with athletes, is knowing your athlete. And I think for you guys as parents, it's knowing your child, not just who they are on the field, but who they are off the field, just knowing what makes them them, and even just bringing up certain things, being like, hey, you could have worked on this a little bit, but I really like how you did that, right? So leaving it with a positive thing. Controlling the controllables. So often with perfectionism and perfectionists, we tend to get so, oh my gosh, well, I could have done so much better if the umpire wouldn't have done this, or if this wouldn't have happened. Well, guess what? That was in the past. We can't control the past. And we also can't control other people or umpires or anyone else. So it's okay to be upset. It's okay, again, to have emotions. But when a certain emotion starts controlling you, that's when there can be some frustration and some upset. And the last one is focusing more on effort rather than expectations. Expectations are a huge thing with perfectionism. And the problem with expectations is, when we set expectations, sometimes our expectations are outside of our control. So, it might be to get, let's say, third place or first place or whatever, but you don't always know who you're up against. You might give everything you have, but sometimes there are just going to be situations in life where no matter how hard you try, you might not live up to your expectation. So it's focusing more on effort. Hey, I'm going to give the best that I can today. This is the result that I would really like to have. But if it doesn't happen, I'm going to be proud of myself that I gave my all, rather than I need to do this or I'm not going to be able to sleep, if that makes sense. Coach AB, do you have anything to highlight on?
I just constantly think about our sport specific, and I know you guys are all softball athletes and some of your daughters may be multi-sport athletes, but we play an incredibly cruel sport, right? And one of the things that I joke with the girls is like, ask your girls, this is a really cool conversation piece, if they are multi-sport athletes, what happens if you miss a volley in volleyball? What happens if you miss a bump or a set, if the ball's coming back? what happens if you miss a shot in basketball? And I ask the girls, I say, even at your age, 12 and under, whatever basketball is, they're getting opportunities to put up 12 to 15 shots in a youth game. And when we think about softball, I ask them, I say, in a 5-inning game, if you're playing, 65 minutes, 75 minutes, how many times roughly do you get the ball? And depending on the position, it's like 2 or 3. Maybe if you're a shortstop, it's 5 or to 7. And they start to see, oh, yeah, I have way less chances. So that when I stew in my mistakes or I want to be perfect, or even our at bats, like you're not going to go 3 for 3. It starts to click. But we can't assume, like that's why you guys are here. And that's why you're investing in the mental game and learning from Coach Carley. It's all about creating that awareness and helping them to understand what are the factors. There's umpires and a game of failure and strike zones, and you're working on your hitting and all of these things. Softball is a really insane sport when you think about it. So that's all I have to add about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And working with a lot of baseball and softball athletes, it is. You have so much up against you, and they're two of the biggest sports that you have very little control over the outcome or the result. It's one of those things. So yeah, I think you worded it perfectly. Like, it's crazy. There's so many different things. Absolutely. So with that being said, so again, we started this off with, perfectionism and moving into self-acceptance. So how do we get, or how do you as parents support your child with moving into self-acceptance? Well, unfortunately, it's not something that happens overnight, but you'll notice, it's the same way physically. If you want to get better at something physically, you have to continue to put in the reps. If you decide, hey, you know what, I want to get stronger, so I'm going to hire a trainer or start going to the gym more, it doesn't just happen overnight. You have to continue to do it over and over and over again. So the number one thing is self-compassion. And this is more of I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with mindfulness. It's a mental skill that it's all about being in the moment. And I actually wrote my thesis on it, but this is a piece kind of mindfulness is self-compassion. It's not about being easy on yourself. It's not about being like, oh man, you know what? Like, I just didn't stick to my goals today. Like, I'm just going to pat myself on the back and sit here and do nothing. It's not about being easy on yourself, but it's not about being hard on yourself either. So as you would treat, hopefully in a good way, as you would treat a teammate or a friend and helping them to feel better when they're feeling down, give yourself that same sort of self-compassion. So I think that teaching your kids, and even, I'm sure some of you parents, or you might even have a friend that is like really hard on themselves. This is something you can take away from it too. And it's something that I've even had to practice what I preach because I'm so like, okay, I just want to do well and I want to be the best person that I can be. But remembering, I need to offer myself some grace. And I actually, the other day, I wasn't even watching the Olympics that much, but a snowboarder, I heard her say, she was like, I think I just, the pressure's just a lot. And I was really emotional. And I think we all need to just give ourselves a little grace. And I love that so much. That's exactly what self-compassion is, knowing that you gave it your all, but also being like, meeting yourself in the middle, essentially. Focusing on process over the outcome. So focusing on all the daily, like, little things to get better. So not just saying, hey, you know what, kid, you better get this many home runs. It's more about, hey, you know what, are you focusing on all the things that you need to do daily to get better? Are you, helping to hold them accountable, even, as parents, and also just focusing on that process rather than the outcome is so key. Because if you have somebody that is very perfectionistic, they're just going to continue to try to focus on the outcome. And honestly, they're not even going to really pay attention to daily living. It's just going to be so focused on the future. Also trusting yourself. I think the older we get, we'd like to think that we know ourselves better. But the older we get as well, the more experiences that we have. So kind of vicarious experiences. If you see your son or daughter, this can be obviously if you have other kids out and that aren't in softball, but if you see somebody, struggling, and reminding them, hey, you know what, last time you were really nervous, but you know what, this time you got it. Or, hey, you know what, to a friend, or even maybe you're a financial advisor, or you are a CEO at a company and your friend has to give a presentation and they're so nervous, saying, hey, you know what, you did it last time. Just trust yourself. I think is such a big part of self acceptance. And then putting in the reps, which I kind of started this off with, just continuing to put in the reps mentally, physically, continuing to do it every day, continuing to do it daily. The more that you practice that mindset of self-compassion and, being kind to yourself, the more that you're going to continue to have that result. So I have up here perfectionism examples. So I'm very big on, the applied aspect. Obviously, this was something for you guys to learn about, but I wanted to kind of give some examples that either the first three are ones that I've dealt with athletes, and then the last one is kind of one that I've kind of dealt with, but kind of made it up. So I just want you guys to write in the chat whether you think these are more functional or dysfunctional. So those two factors that I talked about earlier, the functional perfectionism being, the having the high striving for yourself, those goals for yourself. And then dysfunctional being when it gets to be too much, where it's not helpful. So the first one is feeling like I let my team down. I'll go to my car and cry for an hour afterwards. This was actually a soccer player that one of my clients in high school. And she is, oh boy, that's cool. Didn't know that could happen. Love it. I guess
that's weird. I don't know. That was so weird. I tried to press Control D. Apparently that is dysfunctional.
That's okay. Awesome. Apparently it's dysfunctional, right?
Killing it, Carly. You got the drums.
Oh, but I do not know how to the drums. Yeah, I think some of you wrote it in the chat. That one's dysfunctional, right? Pretty much she took it upon herself, even if her teammates, were like, you know what, it's okay, like it'll be good, you gave it your all, whatever. She would go to her car and cry for an hour afterwards. And then that, of course, is just affecting the rest of her night. It's affecting her self-confidence. So good. That one was dysfunctional. The next one, my parents help make my goals for me. This actually is, she's a runner, and she's one of 4 kids, and her brothers are really big into hockey and baseball. And she just wants to run just because she enjoys running. And the other week I was talking to her and she was like, yeah, my dad literally like will make my goals for me and tell me I have to do it. That is 100% taking away the enjoyment of the sport. And it also is like making her even more perfectionistic. She's already perfectionistic, but this is also adding so much pressure on her and stress. And it slowly started to surface and come out just how much it's affecting her. So what one would you guys rate that one as? Yeah, I probably gave it away in my example, but good. That one's dysfunctional as well. The third one, I wrote down my weaknesses first because I like to think I have areas in which I can improve upon. Okay, dysfunctional. Okay. Anybody else have any guesses? Dysfunctional, positive, growth opportunities, more positive. Okay. So this one's kind of tricky. So it's kind of, I would lean more towards, okay, somebody said functional. I would lean more toward dysfunctional just because it says about weaknesses first. But there's also that piece of, I like to think I have areas in which I can improve upon. So that one, it might be somebody who, you can be working with somebody or have a child who shows both, is sometimes has that, that, hey, I just really want to excel and I really want to do well for myself. But then at times they can really beat up on themselves. That can happen. There can be a combination. But yeah, I would say that one is is a little more dysfunctional just because of the weaknesses, but there are some things in that one that could make it functional as well. Last one, I would stay hours after practice and wouldn't let myself leave until I made at least 15 free throws in a row. If I messed up one, I started all over. Yeah, dysfunction. Yep. Yep. And I think that it's something in our culture, even more, and maybe even more years ago, that it's mental toughness, right? It's looking at it as, oh man, well, I'm mentally tough. I'm going to stay after, I'm going to practice. I'm going to give it my all. But this is right here is like what leads to burnout, right? It's just eventually your body is just going to become so exhausted, and mentally you're going to become so exhausted over time. Like if you're somebody that continues to do that, that's what we don't want. And also a big thing I think is I always love to say, is it my mind giving in or is it my body giving up? Knowing and being self-aware of, hey, you know what? Am I just checking out? If I'm working out and doing burpees, am I just like, oh man, I can't do this last one? Or is my body just physically like, you know what, I'm done? Is such a big thing. So good. You guys did great with those. So I'm really big on summaries and key takeaways, especially when there's a ton of different information. So kind of three things to really take with you are, it's beneficial to hold yourself to a high standard, kind of like we talked about, as long as you can control thoughts about errors and setbacks. So it's okay to say, you know what, I really want to do this. But as time goes on, if I mess up or if I make mistakes, it's okay. It might really be hard to do that, but at the end of the day, it's going to be okay. That's when it can be beneficial, and this type of functional perfectionism. And best performance is associated with functional perfectionism, of course. So having that standard, that motivation, to continue to work hard, to excel, that's going to help with performance. That's what we want. Perfectionism, motivation to perform, pushing through injury, need to please others, no assertiveness. It's all been connected to burnout. This last one really makes me think of, I have a client who just started at Bucknell this year, and he just pretty much his senior year, he just kept going. He kind of had an injury, but decided to just take care of it for a little, but then went back. And then he ended up getting super sick. He ended up having to go to a hotel because of mold in his dorm room. So like things that were outside of his control, but pretty much he was so perfectionistic, and essentially everything just went wrong. It was just like his first semester in college, poor dude, like just everything went wrong. But I think he started to see, what really is important. And he started to notice he became burnout because there was this idea of being so perfectionistic, pushing through injury, needing to be the best, and also needing to be the best on the team. Meanwhile, he was a freshman at a great school, and it just was not realistic at all. So that's just an example of someone that I've worked with, not softball related. This example wasn't, because he's a runner, but I mean, it happens all the time. So yeah, anything to add, Coach AB?
I love the takeaways. I think parents are more equipped to understand this simply by your presentation and having awareness. I would love a pulse. I guess how many of you guys, you can unmute or you can pop in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, yes, my daughter absolutely without a doubt has functional and dysfunctional. It could be both. 10 would be, yes, she has perfectionism tendencies. Maybe 5 is middle of the road, or maybe 1 is, no, she really doesn't. Or maybe you just haven't noticed. Where are we at on a scale of 1 to 10? What would you guys say? I love scales of 1 to 10 with the girls. It's easier for them to kind of give a starting point, and then maybe that'll prompt some questions. And I'm sure Carly would love to answer questions as well. Wow.
9. Yeah.
I wanted, before this gets too far, down in the chat, Chris said there are 2 extremes of perfectionism. One where they won't attempt things because they can't do it perfect. And then there is one overworking and feeling bad trying to be perfect. My daughter tries to hide her tendencies with indifference when asked. Anyone else see that? I mean, you can see the head nods. That's awesome, Chris. I mean, the situation is not awesome, but the fact that you're aware of it. Is there a question with that, if you'd like to unmute?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. I'm in a car because my daughter's actually at a meeting. And so I've got stuff coming through my speaker and other stuff. So it took me a while to figure it out. But I guess my daughter has done both extremes. So now she tries to hide, and by indifference, when you ask her about it, or even when you talk about goals, like she's a perfectionist, but you'll say, well, why don't you make goals? Well, that's a setup for failure. And it's like, okay, no, I know that and stuff. So I guess my question would be, I've done different language. I try and set up expectations with different language. And you've kind of touched on that. But my question would be how to push a perfectionist in areas that they need to be pushed in without pushing too hard.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. There's a lot of gray area. I think the first thing is, again, going back to identify strengths and weaknesses, right? Saying, hey, what do you see? And also, then kind of discussing what you might see in a kind way, saying, hey, I noticed that you put, that you really struggle with motivating yourself, or that you're only motivated, when other people are telling you to do stuff, whatever it is. And kind of like going off of that. But I think another thing is, you mentioned goals or expectations, right? Didn't you say, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. She said she doesn't want to make goals because it's setting herself up for failure.
Yes.
Okay. So not all goals are going to set you up for failure either. Right. Is it a realistic goal, right? Like, is it something that's realistic? Is it something that is even attainable, right? So I think there's a big difference between, and that's why I really stray away from expectations a lot of times, right? It's goals. What can you do inside of your control every day, right? So like, let's say that, like for me, a big thing I do is journaling, and I have like a lot of my clients do it, and saying, okay, you know what? If it's not realistic for you to journal for, 5 days a week, all right, let's do it 2 days a week, do it for 2 minutes, right? And so it's kind of meeting them in the middle. So I think it's not necessarily the expectations or the whole thing with goal setting. And something that I didn't mention, but with perfectionists, is black or white thinking a lot of times. Right. So she probably has in her head, okay, well, all goal setting's bad because it's just going to set me up for failure, so I don't want to do it at all. But that's not the right mindset to have. But you're probably going through this revolving door, essentially trying to get her to, think about it, but then also being like, oh, well, it's just going to set me up for failure. So I think really trying to think about, well, or challenging her even and saying, well, how is it setting you up for failure? Like, what are your goals? Is that something that's realistic? And I think kind of challenging her thinking might lead her more to being like, well, maybe, or it might take her a little bit to open up about it, but it's just somewhere to start.
Yeah, I almost feel like it's her. She doesn't want the goals because it's more pressure, and she feels like she should be able to do it without the goals. You know what I mean? Like she's one of those people who like if she doesn't, she learns and does things really quickly, and if she doesn't get it in the first 10 minutes, now I'm frustrated because I usually get it in 10 minutes. I should have it already. Like, and she's a pitcher, so she's learned most of her pitches in like 10 minutes, and then just went on to make them better. And so that's why she gets frustrated. Like, oh, this pitch isn't working today. What's wrong? Like there's something wrong with me. So
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing is knowing that, and it's not going to just happen overnight, but knowing, hey, you know what, I'm going to have off days. It goes back to that human, you know, the mentality of being human. I mean, again, I think even for females too, that Simone Biles couldn't be a better example of, you know, whether it's something that you agree or disagree with being able to perform at the highest level. I mean, it's just something to remember, being human first, you know, and I think it's something that we forget. And we're all going to have good days and we're all going to have bad days. It's life. So yeah, that's just something that I would really try to explain to her. How old is she?
she's 14. She I tried to put it in. I unfortunately somehow I got onto posting to a single person. So I put her in. She's 14. She plays on a 16U team. Found out today she's the starting varsity pitcher as a freshman. So she's good, but she feels the pressure as everything she goes. Like her comment today was, as she comes in the car, is, I found out I have a game on Tuesday. They have new signs. I'm worried about the signs. So this is my daughter, by the way.
Hi. Hello.
So
Awesome.
yeah,
Thank you for sharing.
thank
Love
you.
that.
Well,
One of the things I would love to add, and this is for everybody's situation too, is I think as their brains are developing, and even us, right? It's human nature to be so locked in on our own lives. So the more that you can give her examples of, hey, this is your mom here. Let me tell you about a time where I messed up at work. Let me tell you about a time where I let my emotions snap. Let me tell you about a time where I failed. And the more that you can help meet them where they're at, again, these don't have to be softball analogies, and maybe you guys did play sports. You could give them a sports analogy. I will never forget this. My dad played basketball, and the only 2 points he ever scored was for the other team. And I'll never forget that conversation because it was literally after a game where I walked in the winning run in a championship game when I was 12. I know what field, what town. I will never forget that moment. And it had nothing to do with the fact that I had just lost the game. My dad just wanted to say, like, dude, you're human. I love you. You want to hear something embarrassing that I've done? And it was like the most significant moment in my career because it was like, okay, I'm going to have that image in my mind for the rest of my life. So yeah, what can you bring to your daughter's life that would be similar is my advice too. This is awesome. You guys. This is great.
I think that's a great point to bring up. And I think something alongside with that is social support, right? So it's kind of going off of that you're offering them social support and through sharing those experiences. And I think another thing that I didn't mention, I know we talked about fear of failure, but fear is such a big thing, especially for, you know, young kids. I'm sure we all can remember back to a time growing up where we were just afraid, right? Whether there were monsters under our bed or whatever it was. So fear is just, you know, it's an analogy essentially. So I think too, just bringing up being like, okay, well, what are you fearful of? What are your fears in life? Helping them know that and really challenging them. Like, I'll never forget learning in one of my classes in undergrad about fear. My professor said, when people are fearful of public speaking, they're not afraid of standing up there in front of a ton of people. They're afraid about what everybody's thinking, what everybody's going to say about you at the end, right? So a lot of times it's something that we need to check. Yep. False evidence appearing real. Absolutely. It's something that we need to remember. And I think that the more that you can challenge their fears and being like, okay, well, why are you fearful of failing? You know, what's inside of your control? You can't control the future, right? I think is such a big thing. And honestly, every time that like I've been fearful in life, I have to practice what I preach and pause and challenge myself, and saying, what's the cost of taking a leap of faith and what's the cost of not? And a lot of times it's a greater cost of, okay, not taking the leap of faith. I mean, if I didn't do that, then I wouldn't have my own practice. So I think it's just something to really get them to start thinking about young, from a young age, because what you're filling their brain with is really going to determine who they become as an adult.
We want to be mindful of time. We do have the whole hour planned. So if you guys have questions, you're more than welcome to continue to ask questions. Carley, this has been amazing. Obviously, this is recorded. We'll put this up in the parent portal. But if you guys would like to go, you're more than welcome to go. We will just continue to do Q&A for the last 10 minutes. If anyone has questions. Carley, do you have anything to add?
Can I ask something real quick?
Yeah, yes, Lori.
All right. How do you tell the difference between like more of a control issue versus fear, and the dysfunctional thought process on all of that, whether it be in pitching or I have another daughter and her thing is she's exceptional in, arts and she refuses to try it because she doesn't want to have obviously that failed, but it's that extreme control in that thought process of what other things are going on and she can't control what other people are doing. Like, how do you help them with that kind of a scenario or that thought process?
Yeah. So just to clarify, do you mean kind of like how do you get them to like be okay with not being able to control everything, essentially?
Yeah. Like my one daughter, well, instead of like everyone's like, you did amazing at the school play, you did this, and she'll stop and she will never go back to it because she now has an expectation where she excelled and she refuses to go back to that because if it isn't as good as it was before, then I'm not going to try. And then my other softball player is, she's like, I've got this. I can't control everything around me but I'm going to keep going forward and I just work on it. And I have polar, opposites, but yet they expect much out of everything as far as functional and dysfunctional. So I have a hard time navigating all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a big thing is, asking them, a lot of times I have athletes, the higher up you go, what you'll notice, and there's been so much research to even support this with youth sports, the number one reason for dropping out is lack of enjoyment. So you'll notice I don't know if people follow the NFL, whatever team that you like, you'll notice like as you climb up the ladder, like NFL players, NBA players, like your enjoyment level starts to go down because it's not just playing for fun anymore. It then becomes a chore. It becomes your career. It becomes, supporting your family, all these different things. So the same thing kind of happens with youth sport. You enter sport, for fun, to be with your friends, to, have fun, whatever it is. And then as you continue to excel in an area, then a lot of times we start to build more pressure from ourselves or parental pressure or placing expectations. So really just getting her to kind of pause and, if everybody's saying, oh, great job. And, but really being like, well, do you enjoy it? There's a difference between continuing when you absolutely do not enjoy it anymore, or you just, and sometimes that happens, but there's a difference between enjoying it but choosing not to continue doing it because of the expectations. There's a huge difference. So I think asking her, okay, well, what's your why did you start this in the first place? Remember when you started. Going back to your why is so powerful. I do it with athletes all the time. Like no matter how long we've been working, I constantly challenge them to go back to their why. Why did you start doing it in the first place? Why do you enjoy doing it? That's something that I would really recommend. Try doing it.
And everyone on this call has access to the Fearless Warrior program. So Carley is learning our program as well. Lori, you could simply just say, hey, let's revisit module 3 together. That's your why. That would be amazing.
Okay. Thank you.
I know I bet it in. Lori, did that help?
Yeah, that helps. It's just one of those. I think I'm trying to figure out my tips and tricks and like how to interact with them and change our discussions and all of that. And like our softball player, I always say, do you love it? Do you still like doing it? Because we can be happy one way or another. It doesn't have to be like, if you don't want to do it anymore, that's fine. Wonderful. We can have our weekends back and we're not traveling and we're not paying all this. Wonderful. Fine. If you still want to do it, great. It's all about, let's just have it be family time. But it's more like how I navigate her self-imposed, thought process. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on up here to, navigate that. And so, yeah, I'm trying to figure it out.
You're doing great. You're showing up. You're here. You're trying, and your daughter best too. And the more that you can just get curious, I think so often we forget too, is that we're in these environments and we want to push. And so I know you're probably already doing this, but the more you can have these conversations, at a coffee shop or in the drive-through of dinner or, at the dinner table when they're not in that softball environment is huge. And just really playing dumb sometimes and getting curious and saying, really, is that really how you think? Or, well, I'm curious, what makes you think that? And scale of 1 to 10s have become my favorite tool ever as a coach. So think of a scale of 1 to 10.
Scale of 1 to 10. Okay. That's a good thought process and stuff. Yeah. I like that. I just asked her the other night, like, well, how do you expect that to turn out? Like, what's your thought? How is this going to look?
Yeah.
Please explain that to me. So I like that one. That's a new tip to use.
With love and curiosity. I'm working on that too. As a coach and as a parent.
That's fun. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more if anyone wants to hop on quick, or even in the chat. Don't feel like you have to unmute. If you want to type something in the chat, we will support you in the chat as well. Let me ask this, for Carley's sake and for my sake, this is so fun. I love collaborating and getting different perspectives. I took notes tonight. I'm going to be posting some in the Facebook group as well, but I would love to know what's something that you wrote down. What has been your biggest takeaway from this training tonight? And everyone can pop that in the chat and I will mute and so you guys don't hear my keyboard, and I will type mine as well. What was your biggest takeaway? We'd love to know.
I love that. Praise the process. I love that.
I put self-awareness is like one of my biggest takeaways.
Yeah. I love that too. I always say, I think that one of the biggest reasons why I'm so passionate about what I do is a lot of the skills that I teach, we aren't taught in school. We're not taught how to deal with emotions. We might say at younger levels in education, oh, I'm feeling this today, or I'm feeling that. But what happens when you start to age and you start to become an adult, or you're in college and you experience really, really terrible stress for the first time, or, you know, how to handle anger, how to manage certain things, or we're not taught self-awareness, you know, it's not a class that we take. So why I love what I do is helping athletes learn stuff that they're just going to be able to apply to life. You know, at some point, no matter whether you end up becoming an Olympic athlete, whoever you are, you're going to hang it up, you're going to retire. So it's being able to carry this stuff with you throughout life. So yeah, I love that you said self-awareness. It's the number one thing with mental skills. So awesome.
Very cool, you guys. It is 8:58 here in Nebraska, and I know my East Coast people, like Coach Carley, it is late for you guys. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for hanging out and growing the mental game. I know I say that a lot. When you guys grow the mental game, there really is no right or wrong way to do this. It's simply showing up, taking action, getting curious, and creating that awareness. And you guys did that tonight. So thank you guys for being here. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. And thank you for participating and stuff. You guys were a great group. Hopefully you learned something new. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Very cool. Thank you guys. Well, with that, do you guys want to do a parent screenshot? This is hilarious because I always make the girls do screenshots, and you guys laugh at me every single time, but the girls look forward to it. So we're going to do a fun screenshot. I think it would be really fun for you guys to show your daughters mental strength versus mental toughness. So let's see those guns. I'm going to take a screenshot. You can choose which one you want. And this will be posted in the Facebook group so you can show your daughters how cool you are. All right, let's see those guns. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. I love it, you guys. Okay, we will see you guys on the next parent workshop. Thank you, Coach Carley.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.